Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creative Live. My name is Kenna Klosterman, and I am your host today for the podcast We Are Photographers that we have here on Creative Live, where we come to you live, of course, right now from my living room to yours, to the living rooms, kitchens, and studios, home studios of photographers, filmmakers, creative industry game changers from all over the world, to let y'all know that you are not alone in your creative struggles and wins as well. We're all living this creative life, and the more that we can learn from other people's stories, the more it gives us the courage and ability to keep moving forward with our own. And so today I am super excited to have our guest, Taylor Rees. And Taylor is a photographer, a filmmaker, a documentarian. She is a photojournalist as well and an avid explorer. Taylor does a lot of work around environmental and humanitarian issues that she is passionate about and making changes through filmmaking through the world. Her background is at Yale. She ran the Environmental Film Festival for 2 years, again, before becoming a full-time director and filmmaker and producer. She is a Sony Artisan, and she has also shot for clients including National Geographic, North Face, United Nations, and so many more. And so excited to bring on today Taylor Rees. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting. This is the most live thing I feel like I've done during quarantine. So yeah, it's cool to have live conversation and looking forward to it.
Awesome. And so, speaking of that, the live factor, I would love to give shout outs to people who are tuning in from all over the world. So, if you are, whether you're watching on creativelive.com/TV, where you can click on the chat icon and let us know where you're tuning in from, or if you're on Facebook, Twitter, again, give me those shout outs and we can let Taylor know where you are joining from. So, Taylor, today is very exciting because one of your most recent films is being released. Today we're recording on September 1st. How is it already September? I'm not sure. But From Kurils with Love. So I love to start talking about some people's most recent projects and then kind of going back in time. So congratulations. Tell us about this film and what led you to create it.
Yeah, so the film launched today on YouTube, and so that's a good place to find it. The backstory was kind of interesting. My partner, both in filmmaking and in life, Renan Ozturk, did a trip to the North Pole, filming a group of women who did kind of an all-women's trip there, and got connected with this group, Tomorrow Unlocked, and they wanted to go to the Kuril Islands and kind of commissioned a piece from us that brought photographers and adventurers together to kind of explore this place. And the other producer from Tomorrow Unlocked, Pavel Torrid, and I were talking about how, like, well, we can't go to this zone if we don't bring some scientists to kind of help us interpret this landscape, both underwater and over water. And so he and I spent months trying to find someone who studied this region. We went to Scripps Institute of Oceanography, where we connected with Rishi Sugla, who was also on the trip, who's an oceanographer. But we just really couldn't find anyone from Japan or Russia who worked in this area. So we ended up bringing Rishi and Jeff Kirby as two ecologists and scientists to join all the photographers. And we thought, well, we'll just go and kind of see what happens and just document the journey. And the night before the trip, literally we get a phone call, and basically someone said, oh, there's this Russian marine mammal biologist that is asking if he can hitchhike on your boat. And his sailboat was destroyed in a volcanic eruption 2 weeks ago, and he needs to check and see if the seals and the sea lions survived on that island and check his time-lapse cameras. And so he was just hoping to kind of stow away. And we were like, well, there's really only one bed. It's in the hallway. And he's like, it's no problem. So that was Vladimir Burkanov, and he joined our crew and completely changed the journey. And so the film is really about him and his work and this adventure. And yeah, so excited to be able to release it out into the world. There's a GoFundMe that's attached to it because supporting this kind of scientific work is really difficult in these regions. So we're also doing some impact work with him.
Well, that's very exciting. So again, from Kurils with love, and that's spelled Kurils, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's really interesting, Taylor, that you talked there about a couple things I want to explore further: finding stories, and then impact as well. And so I know sort of in a number of the projects that I've heard you talk about or watched that you talk about how the story can change in the making of the story, and going back to one of the epic adventures and filmmaking of adventures that you had back in Burma, Myanmar. And so I'm wondering if you can take us back to that story, and how your kind of direction changed at that point.
Yeah, so it was 2014. I had just finished graduate school where I did a master's in environmental science and environmental media. And my partner Renan was living in Utah. So I finished grad school, moved in with him, and we got the opportunity to go to Burma, to the northern tip where the Himalayas kind of extend. So it's actually the Burmese Himalaya. And the journey was intended to kind of investigate this mystery, which is what is the tallest peak in Southeast Asia. It's inconclusive, perhaps to this date, because you really have to stand on top with a high-powered GPS to get that reading. Not even satellites can determine. And at the time, it was my first expedition. It was my first trip to Asia. It was a very new and exciting experience for me. It was definitely a mountain climbing and kind of writing driven journey with National Geographic and the North Face, and that was kind of the goal. And the journey itself was incredible, extremely arduous. We walked over 300 miles in total, and along the walk, it was 150 miles to the mountain and 150 miles out, passing through all of these villages in this northern region. And, each night we were staying in a different community. And, there's just a lot going on within those communities. So I think what really hit me at that time was, at any time you travel or anytime you're telling a story, obviously all around you are so many other stories that are happening. And if you're on a mission for one, you kind of have to stay on that mission for one. But I was feeling extremely drawn by what was going on there. The state government, I think, was trying to turn that area into more of a tourism or conservation zone, but the communication between those that lived there was not super healthy or collaborative. And so we just made space and time to have knowledge sharing sessions. So at night along these villages, we would sit and with a translator and just kind of go back and forth. And I don't know, I just really fell in love with like that kind of storytelling, tuning into those kinds of questions. And eventually we made it up to the top of the mountain, and the team attempted and got very close, but did not succeed. I stayed at base camp alone for 2 weeks. And so just kind of further embedded a little bit into the culture of the people that we were there with. And we came out, and I think it transformed me because it both, reinforced my love for adventure and exploration, but it also solidified to me how important I think it is to, really create a lot of space to have dialogue with any community that you're passing through, especially as a storyteller, and, see if there's opportunity to work together to kind of come up with a story that they might need to be told. And so in that circumstance, there was a story. we ended up taking letters that they needed to be delivered to the government, but we didn't get an opportunity to necessarily tell that story with them in film. But yeah, it was an experience.
Well, it's and people can watch some behind the scenes videos about it out there. If you search Taylor's name, and what I found interesting was that it was, you know, one of your early expeditions, and you've done many more since there. But that it was that, you know, connecting with the culture in addition to the land, and how that kind of has shaped what I've seen you create in other projects as well. Um, can you tell us a little bit about one of the most recent projects that you're still working on, kind of similarly in this concept of co-creating, with hearing the voices of people who are in the spaces where you're going to tell stories, but you're working in northern Chile. Can you tell us a bit about that project and how that, you know, kind of mindset of working co-creating is happening there?
Yeah. So I'm currently working on a feature documentary about kind of the social justice side of green technology and sustainable transitions. It's taking place in northern Chile and also Argentina, where lithium mining is exploding as a result of the demand and increase for electric vehicles. And so this story came to me through a group in San Diego called the Center for Interdisciplinary Environmental Justice. They're a group of mostly academics connected with UCSD and Scripps, at least at the time. They've spread out elsewhere, who are dedicated to a lot of different kinds of work in the social justice space, but in particular, they're transforming how their own scientific work is done. So they're calling it decolonial feminist science, and essentially what that means is, and I think that what scientists do is often what filmmakers do too, or how these industries have typically functioned in the past, where people in positions of power who have resources will go out into the world, into other places, and scientists will study things, and they'll study landscapes, or they'll study people as like an expert, and in some way, shapes and forms, like documentary filmmaking has a very extractive history. This idea of like going to a far place to like be the one to tell a story about someone else. So decolonial feminist science really relies on premises and values of relationships, of deciding together across, where at least in this example, these scientists are going down, rather than just deciding like, oh, we're going to study how the water table in this region works. They work with the communities to together kind of come up with like what questions are important, how can we generate knowledge or information or data that can actually be used by these communities, so it doesn't just like end up in reports and in institutions here in the US. Like, how do we really co-create knowledge in ways that are useful, that are especially in solidarity in the cases of like fighting for justice with these mining operations. And so we've basically been applying those same practices to the making of the documentary. And there's a lot of groups of people and a lot of organizations who are doing this kind of work, just trying to bring new principles to how stories are told, who gets to tell stories, how they're co-created with characters or communities, especially if those characters or communities are at all vulnerable or at risk. And yeah, I mean, what it really looked like is the first trip that I went down there for, we spent a lot of time giving presentations and just creating a lot of space to talk about, if we were to make a film, like, here's how I see it could look. How do you think it could look? And here's how it could be used in the US, and here's what an impact campaign that's kind of organized in the US could look like. We met with lawyers that are helping them. How would this film provide assistance or be impactful in your communities, and how can we create something that does it all, or do we need to create two different pieces? And just the whole, and then ever since then, the many trips, I bring cuts of the film and we talk about it together, where we're directing that story together. And It's changing often, and with COVID, I haven't been able to get down since February. So hoping to get back. Yeah, I was just actually talking to one of the organizers, Rosa, in Argentina this morning. They're actively working to bring like a legal front to this issue. Basically, like a lot of the laws, environmental laws, are being broken as these mines are expanding into indigenous territory and disrupting natural ecosystems pretty drastically. So yeah, we're just, we're in constant communication. It's a real privilege to be able to be a part of it. I'm excited to just, continue the journey. I'd say we're about halfway through.
And it's interesting that you to talk about just that, again, that co-creating and the importance of working with, like I said, working with people on the ground in the places where you're telling the story. And I'm curious if we can now kind of go back to earlier days for you, and because a lot, again, you're talking a lot about environmentalism work, science work, and what came first for you? Was it the science, or was it the photography and filmmaking?
I took a photography class in high school, like a darkroom film class, and just loved it. So I've always loved photography and, the arts and crafts of imagery and storytelling. I went to school. My bachelor's degree was also in ecology and climate change. And during my field research trips in Greenland, the first one I spent 2 summers in Greenland during undergraduate study, and it was amazing, like to show up in this country. And in the summer, there's this place in Kangerlussuaq called KISS, the Kangerlussuaq International Science Station. And it's just like a locust swarm of scientists from all over the world, like, come and descend into this place in the summer. And they're, hydrologists and physicists and climatologists and ice core studies and all these things. And they go out onto the landscape and are trying to learn and detect. This was back in, 2004, 5, 6. And so climate change, the data collecting from climate change was in full swing, trying to figure out, how these changes were impacting environments. And what I noticed was just, that same thing, like not seeing a lot of interaction with the local Inuit communities. And I kind of wondered, like, are they brought into these scientific studies? Are they taken on these trips to the ice to like have dialogue about what they see and what they know? So it's not just, scientific tools. And so the following summer, I brought a video camera, got a small grant, and tried to make a film kind of about that, interviewing locals about their experience of having all these scientists in their space and kind of what that was like in the summer. Unfortunately, I cut it to some Radiohead music and put it on YouTube, and I lost the file, and has since like disappeared. But that's, anyway, that's really the first time I realized what a tool filmmaking could be. So yeah, I think they've gone hand in hand my whole life, both science and photography, and a love for kind of telling stories and looking especially like at the interaction between Earth systems and people.
And then you also have that impact layer on all of that as well. And I heard you say, media is power. And so when you go into several, some of these projects, do you have that end goal in mind of what you are hoping to change via filmmaking? And is there another success story that you can share with us?
Yes, I think this is a really interesting question that a lot of people are wrestling with today. I mean, I think documentary film can be so many things. It can be deeply personal. It can be art. It doesn't have to have an impact necessarily. It has value. Stories are who we are. They're how we live. They change us, they create us. And so, but when in the context of like environmental and humanitarian documentaries in particular, I think that there is a strong push that we're in right now to really clarify exactly why we're making these films and what impact they have. And, a part of that is like, being really strategic and having a lot of, having a goal that everyone kind of knows is the direction to go in. And you can be building those impact campaigns, whether they're legal or petitions or, shifts in consumer behavior or all these things kind of along the way. But it's just as important to recognize that anytime a story is told, there's going to be impacts on the people who it's told about, whether those were intentional or not. So part of that impact is also just knowing it's not just like how much good can we do, but it's like once this is out and it does change people's perception of a place or an issue, like how do we know that that's going to not be harmful to anyone who is involved?
And I mean, I think it's a very beautiful point that you just made in terms of stories are who we are, stories are how we live, and they can be art and and not, and even you think documentary and you often do think like that there's not that there's an agenda, but that there is potentially a goal in mind. Can you share some of sort of maybe one of your personal projects that is a story that truly impacted you as a human as well?
Yeah. We just released a short film called Ashes to Ashes, which is a story that the coming together of it was not intended. It kind of was a bit of a family affair, actually. Shirley Jackson Whitaker, who's a producer of the film and also a character in the film, she's a Black artist and doctor from the South, but living in Massachusetts. I grew up just around the corner from her. We live on the same street, and she a number of years ago was hosting kind of a neighborhood dinner. She was going to be putting together a funeral memorial service for the 4,000 to 6,000 men, women, and children who were lynched during the Jim Crow era, and many of whom did not receive funerals. And so she was doing the ceremony, and she had been looking for a filmmaker to kind of help cover it, and she couldn't find one. And my dad was at that dinner, and my dad was like, "Oh, Shirley, you should call Taylor. Like, she does doc these days." And so Shirley called me and asked if I would help document that funeral, and which was amazing. It was, we got the chance to do that together. Just kind of interviewed her about art and healing and addressing dark parts of history as a way of healing. And then through her one day, she was like, "Oh, Taylor, I was at an art gallery and I met this man, Winfred Rembert, and he survived a lynching in the 60s, an attempted lynching. And he's alive and he lives in New Haven, which was just an hour and a half away. Like, we should go down and interview him. And maybe maybe he can come to the ceremony and we can, do a little bit more to bring light and stories to this part of history." And at that time too, there was a lot of really important conversations coming out of the Black film community in particular about, use of imagery of violence against the Black body and how this can be exploitive. And so I was feeling really like, oh, I don't know if this is my place as a white woman to tell this story. And yet I had, committed and engaged to doing so. I wasn't going to say no or run away from it out of fear either. So I knew I was just going to be on a learning journey about, how to be a better ally, how to bring in diverse film crews and work with advisors and writers and kind of make sure that we were going to be able to do this with tact and sensitivity. And so that was an amazing learning journey in itself, just, knowing how to kind of do something that was a bit scary, but it's also, it was a huge opportunity, and to take that learning journey. And Winfred, the main character of the film, is just the most like amazing and lovable human being on this planet. He's a huge Star Wars fan, and every time we'd film with him, at the end of the day, we'd sit out on his porch and he'd be like, "Taylor, like, can you make me an Obi-Wan Kenobi costume?" And I go get a sheet and we'd like pin it and make these robes, and he'd have this lightsaber, and we'd do photo shoots. And actually, I just talked to him the other day. I guess someone from the Star Wars world reached out after seeing the film, and they're making him his own lightsaber, like a real one. And so he's really excited, and he's currently kind of in and out of the hospital. I'm really hoping he stays well so he can receive all the love and responses to the film, which just also released a couple weeks ago, and you can find it on Vimeo if you search Ashes to Ashes Vimeo. It's up there. It's a staff pick. So yeah, I would love, if anyone hasn't seen it, I would really love for people to take in that story and connect with Winfred if you feel inspired.
What I just watched it this week, and what I love about the way you described it is making me smile, and especially his his love of Star Wars, and just the joy that is able to coexist with pain, is something that that definitely comes through with him, with the other storylines that are going on in the film, and so and sort of the power of art. He's an artist, and the power of art in healing. And so yes, I highly encourage everyone to go watch Ashes to Ashes. Have you had, if filmmaking as an art, photography as an art, is that sort of creative process a healing process for you as well, or is there, when you're attempting a project, do you go into that mindset as well as to how it's going to affect you personally? That's all right.
I didn't realize my phone's off, but apparently it rings on my computer. Yeah, I don't, it's interesting because the film raises the question, is art healing in a way? And yet I think that for Shirley, like, that's her goal, like doing art and hosting these events where multiple artists and creativity is coming together to address a wound, whether that's personal or cultural, is healing. But for Winfred, it's not really healing. I don't think it's making him better. I think he's compelled to do it because he is an artist and he wants to share his story, and he's just someone who is there and expressing, and he's driven to do it, and you couldn't stop him. And I think personally, I tend to agree with that being true for me too, that I don't like do art or films or tell stories like thinking like this is gonna heal all these parts of me, which are both personal and cultural and of community, and if not global. But I do think that being in touch with the parts of myself and the parts of our world that are hurting, maybe, or in need of attention, like it's a response to that call, to look and to listen and to explore that. And yeah, I don't know if I think it raises questions about the definition of healing. Like, what does it mean to heal? Like, do we or does our planet like ever get better, or is it just always changing? But I find a lot of power and transformative power both in my personal life and what I see happening around me in that in the process of like, you know, addressing things that are hard. And so that's probably why I'm driven to tell these kinds of stories.
I, I, I also question the concept of healing as well. So I'd love to sort of dive a little bit further into that, whether that's on a personal level or, you know, or right, global level, because it's, I love that you use the word transformation or uh, integration or just like it's future focused versus past focused,
Mm-hmm.
and you know always evolving, I guess. And I don't know. I'm curious if there are. I'm going to switch gears.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to switch gears to actually the the moonwalk. And another, you're putting out work left, right, and center right now, my friend. um, so this was one that I saw come out recently. A project with Sony. You're a Sony Artisan, and again, like another, like sort of creation of something that is epic. That is, but you know, took many trial and error, and like maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not. Can you tell us about, and also though this like when you're in it, you're this strong connection to the earth, the planet, the moon, um, and showing the beauty of that. Can you tell us a little bit about this project and some of the biggest challenges with it that you overcame?
Yeah, so this is the Sony Moonwalk piece. It started really as a dedication to Dean Potter, who is a climber and a really good friend of Renan, my partner's. And he kind of did the original moonwalk, which was shot by, actually don't remember, but he, you know, walked a high line between two desert towers with the moon behind him. And so Andy Lewis, who is a highliner based in Moab, and we were all talking about, you know, like, well, maybe we could do this again, but in like a new way, you know. So that original moonwalk piece was shot, I don't know, 10 years ago. And so Sony, who we work with, we're both Sony artisans, and they were coming out with a new A7S III camera, which is kind of the new low light machine, incredible sensor capabilities, and they were like, hey, you know, this new camera's coming out. Do you guys have any ideas for how you might want to test it? And we said, well, we've been tossing around this idea of this moonwalk where Andy Lewis would highline between two desert towers, and we would line it up with the rising or setting full moon and shoot it with this camera. And so it seems easy enough, but it was the most complicated thing I've ever done. It's so funny because someone posted a comment once on one of the videos, like, if you had just called a physicist, you know, they could have told you exactly how to do this. But the answer is like, that's not true at all. Like we were using the PhotoPills app, which allows you to set, you know, a million different things. One of them is that you can set a point of like where you're going to shoot and where, and like where the moon is going to be, and then where you would want to be if you needed to align these things. But there's so many factors like elevation and the timing, and every single moon cycle, the moon shifts. Every single night it shifts. And so we scouted this during the full moon of April and May and June in preparation for the July full moon. And, you know, even the fact that the towers, like we had to move the moonwalk many times to different towers. The ones we finally decided on were higher. So the moon actually crosses the path of those towers earlier when it's setting by like a number of seconds. And that difference changes the degree pattern where you have to be by degrees. And so it's like you get all of these tools and all of these calculations together, and you basically can put yourself like almost in the right spot, but to a degree of like 20-meter radius. But when the moment happens, like you're always scrambling a little bit to get over, and you can run. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. It was so hectic. By a miracle, we pulled it off and did capture Andy and the full moon in the same frame a couple times. It was a really fun journey with a really good crew, and the Sony A7 S3 camera is amazing. I had to give it back, which is a bummer.
And people can when you've got some behind the scenes that is part of the story, and can see you and team running around to try to get those angles in in all of those moments. And I was just super impressed by that again continued dedication, because you tried multiple months, multiple moon cycles, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And with this, when it does all come together, like what does that feel like for you in that moment when like it's all coming together?
Oh, in that moment it was blissful, because we had failed so many times that when it like it worked, and that was our last chance. Like even during that trip, you kind of have like 4 days to do it, 2 days on the front end of the full moon and 2 days after, where the moon's pretty big. And that was our last night. It was our last chance. And so I was a huge relief. But, I think the funny thing about creativity is like, you don't often get surges of joy, like when you get something. Like, I think sometimes it comes with like a wave of depression, or, like you're like, now the thing is done and I don't know like who I am anymore. I don't know what to do. That's like maybe more for long-term doc projects. But yeah, that Sony moon moment was a moment of joy.
It's interesting because I kind of always liken that to like the post-wedding blues, that people talk about, like that you're planning something for so long, and it's kind of this like can be such a huge important thing, and then after it, people are like, now what?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you obviously you have a number of projects that you're continuing to work on, but what you've mentioned your partner Renan, and you partner on projects and in life, and is there downtime? Like, how do you approach working and living and co-creating with another human, and how does that sort of affect the work, I guess?
That is a good question. We 2018 and 2019 were so crazy. I mean, we were back to back to back on jobs, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Both just like going at a pace that I wasn't sure we were going to be able to sustain. And so when COVID happened and we had just moved, it definitely gave us a little time to reflect and spend time together too, which was awesome because we had been doing more and more projects apart. So that was really good. Like just remembering like, oh, like I really like you, like hanging out together is great. we should keep doing this. So yeah, that's been good. And I think we had visions and aspirations to create some sort of good balance with life and work, because we're both full-time film producer and directors. We have a studio, it's in our house. We are both like overly passionate workaholics. We can't put things down. Like it's from the minute we wake up until midnight, 365 days a year. And so we, I think both Renan and I definitely are like with this, we're not going to be able to do this for much longer at this pace. We started implementing some boundaries, like, okay, we have to exercise every day, and like just making sure that we were taking better care of ourselves. So if we weren't going to figure out how to structure our lives differently, at least we weren't getting super run down. So that's helped a little. And but starting after that moon shoot, we've been back to back again. We haven't had a day down. We wrapped a commercial shoot yesterday, and we're heading to Africa tomorrow. And so it's happening again. And I don't know. I think if you love what you do, and especially in these fields, these creative fields, it's not like you do a math equation and then you have the answer. It's a creative process. It's never ending. If anyone has the answer to balance, I'm all ears.
I had no idea you were leaving for Africa tomorrow. So first of all, thank you for making the time to be on Creative Live with us. Can you talk about what you are going there to work on?
Sure. So Andrew Harrison Brown is a film director, producer. He did Kefaru on The Last Male White Rhino, and When Lambs Become Lions, which is about elephant trading and poachers, and just kind of the human side of that. And he has a long-standing relationship with the Turkana people of northern Kenya, and has been working on a documentary there about this. Basically the story is there's a young boy who's about to go through his warrior initiation ceremony in a culture that not only revolves around war, but it is the culture, especially for men. The backstory to why there is this conflict between the Turkana and the Samburu, and I just barely know a little, still learning, catching up. But I mean, if you go back to colonization of the region, like these people were forced into some of the less productive and arid lands, and essentially it's like hard for anyone to survive. And so there's this long-standing conflict between these two communities that live on opposite sides of a river, and it's just like infused into this culture. So this young boy Kole is, we're going to be there for his warrior ceremony, but he's like, why are we? I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to become a warrior. And so there's change happening there. There's a cultural shift happening within those communities, where I think a lot of people are questioning whether a culture built around conflict is good for anybody. And so there's a woman, Josephine, who is an incredible activist in the community. She's been organizing kind of anytime that there's a raid or conflict or some sort of, if there's a murder of some kind, she'll go to the other community and kind of broker peace. And her mission, I don't totally understand the full scope, but her thinking is like, if we can teach the women from these communities to like invent more and become entrepreneurs, there's going to be enough resources that we don't have to continue to like kill each other. And so she's organizing these things called, I think it's Queens for Peace, and the women from both communities meet on opposite sides of the river and they walk together. And but there was a raid. I was getting texts. That phone call actually was from Kenya. I guess there's a raid happening right now, and the police are there, and it's all going down as we speak. And so so Andrew's directing the film, and I'm being brought on to direct the female component of it. So kind of embedding with the women and learning from them kind of what they're trying to accomplish. And then Renan is also going to film with Andrew from a more kind of cinematographic perspective. I haven't had enough coffee today. So yeah, it's really exciting. And it's an all Kenyan producing crew that's there. So it'll be a really cool experience. I'm not feeling super prepared, but I don't know if you ever are.
Wow. Well, I will be watching your Instagram to see if you're able to share behind the scenes. And first of all, I hope that everything is okay in the midst of what is happening right now there. But what a what a powerful experience that is going to be for you. And I'm curious if, as a female filmmaker, in what can be a heavily male-dominated industry, filmmaking and photography as well, uh, what I mean, you embedding with the woman do you foresee your ability to tell that story as different being a woman?
Um, yeah, I mean, I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. Like there's this big push, like, hire women and create all female crews, and we definitely need to hire more women in the film industry and the doc industry in particular, and there's some great resources like Brown Girls Doc Mafia is a great one for anyone listening to this that puts together crews, especially doc crews, and wants to bring more women of color into that space. That aside, like, it's interesting that, especially with all these women's campaigns, it's like it's both amazing to see, and it should have come a lot sooner. But at the same time, I think that there's some risk in this thing of like being like women are this and men are that, and so when really like we need to move to a space where all genders across the gender spectrum are have opportunity and have space for their voices and their art to be, a part of our culture. And so, I'm like just trying to figure out how I feel about the women's campaign movement right now. I mean, it's also commercialized, and so that can get kind of funky too. But, as a female, as a woman identifying filmmaker, I do think that at least I personally, will have a better way of, I think, tuning into what these women are going through and what they're creating. And that is why Andrew brought me on. I think he recognized that it's such a female driven social change movement there, that he wanted to bring in a woman to help tell that story. But I don't know if I would say like blanket statement, like, men are insensitive and women are sensitive. And most of the time that's true. But I think we should be getting away from that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, your question was just like, do I think I'll be able to do something different? And yeah, for sure. But anyway, that's a windy answer. Sorry.
I mean, it is. I mean, again, going back to, well, we've, there's being, two genders, but then there's, in history perhaps, but just the, the spectrum, the fact that, like you said, you can't pinpoint one aspect on one person, and then it's another conversation. It's a long conversation.
Totally.
women in filmmaking, and in any case, I'm curious about the directing part, and if you could talk a little bit just in the few minutes that we have left, for people who are sort of getting started in filmmaking, and what are the aspects of like what does it mean to be a director? Like, there's a lot of times you hear these words, you're the director, you're the producer, but if people aren't in it or aren't in the projects, what are sort of the main aspects of what you do in that role?
Yeah, that's a really good and interesting question, I think, especially because, so many of these types of doc projects are often groups of people who all come together, who all wear many hats. The producer is also DITing, which means like backing up data, and, the cinematographer is also doing sound, and everyone often has a creative passion for the story. That's why they've agreed to take on 19 roles and get paid $19. And, so it's like, I think, being a director inherently is holding the creative vision and the space for everything that's happening, at least in the doc space. In the doc space, it's knowing the story, putting together the story, feeling it out, knowing all the things that are going to happen or could change, and then being there as it evolves, and it will always change. And so, basically really paying attention to the characters and what's happening, and like knowing, okay, like we have to change how we're filming this. Let's take a down day and re-strategize, because we're focusing so much on this angle or this part of the story that we're missing this other thing that's happening. So you're kind of like the eagle that is following the important through lines. And I think for me, like having an emotional pulse, or tapping into the emotional pulse of like all the different people who are involved, and knowing how and when and in what ways to connect with that is like a big role of a director as well. And you're guiding the ship, you're directing cameras, telling them where to shoot and how, and kind of leading the team. But I really love being a part of doc teams where anyone can, have contributions in the director space, can offer creative ideas, can feel like we're all figuring out the story together. And so, it's a loose role.
It's with these types of projects. I mean, obviously it takes a massive team, whether that massive is a small team with everybody doing 19 jobs, like you said, or the ability to bring in, all types of other people. What is your favorite hat to wear?
I mean, I'm pretty much on all projects. I'm a producer, director, and shooter. So, the places that we go to are often very remote, and it's just too expensive to bring crews. So, our main team often is like, I'll be a director, producer, and I'll shoot, but there'll also be a main cinematographer, director of photography, and then kind of an AC, assistant camera, who flies drones and backs up data, like an AC DIT drone. So that like 3-man crew, 3-woman-man crew can take you pretty far. I don't like the DIT role. I'll tell you that. I'll do.
Just as important to know what you don't like as much as what you do love.
I don't like it all. We did this shoot in North Kivu in the DRC for National Geographic a couple years ago, and I was shooting and directing interviews and kind of filling all roles. It was just Renan and I as the camera crew, and so I was backing up the data, except the electrical plugs that we were plugging into were not calibrated for our laptops, so I was being like electrocuted for like multiple hours a night in my fingertips while I'm like trying to focus and not drop cards or mess up files. I think that was the last time and I might have lost a file. I don't know. It happens. It's scary.
Yeah, that does not sound like a pleasant experience.
No.
I closing out, I did read an article that was about both you and Renan, and it was asking you to describe each other in 3 words. And Renan said that you were glowing, honest, and resilient. And I see the glowing, the honest, the resilient. I'm curious if you could just kind of, even the experience that you just talked about is, there's have been so many moments of resilience in the type of work that you do. Is there something that you can share with people out there about how you do push through in those moments that then you can look back and say, gosh, I was really resilient?
Yeah, like just what I've learned about kind of overcoming challenges in some ways. Well, I guess first and foremost, I think we all probably face them every day. I think it's human nature. We're evolved. I read this really interesting study not too long ago that that a lot of like the onset of Alzheimer's comes from people who aren't like problem solving, like, and anxiety. That like there's a tie between anxiety and not using your brain to solve enough problems. Like we're built for adversity. We used to have to figure out how to do everything to survive all the time. And so I think when we don't have enough to do that's stimulating in that way, or that's like engaging us to like problem, I think that's when I feel the most anxiety. So, I guess we're all dealing with crises in life, and on these shoots, they happen all the time. And when they happen, they're bad, because when your camera breaks down and you're in the middle of a jungle and there's, you're not where you're supposed to be. And there's all these things that are going on. You're like, okay, like I am surviving and I'm trying to pull everything together to make my mission here, this creative mission, whatever it is, like work. And maybe it's that when the stakes are high and when like, it's just like, when it's bad, it's bad. Like, I think I thrive in that environment, and I bet a lot of us do. And yeah, I don't know if there's like, it's not like there's a lesson to it. Like if you're drawn to it and you love being in absolute chaos and having everything fall apart all around you all the time, like I guess you'll put yourself in those situations, which I tend to do. And it's fun, I think it's at the end of life, like I'll look back and like get to see all the things I've gotten to experience, and I feel really grateful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories, your wisdom, and just so many exciting projects for people to go see and check out. Where can everybody find you, follow you, and see a lot of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I have a website. It's taylorfreesolorees.com. My middle name is actually Free Solo. My parents were climbers. It's on my birth certificate. I was
going to ask you about that because I saw that somewhere and I was like, no, really? Is she serious?
Yeah, I was born in Idaho. My dad, I think the name actually came from my godfather, who is to this day is like a climbing dirtbag photographer that you can either find in the Rockies or in the desert, Greg Jan. So he gave me that middle name. And so yes, also my Instagram handle is Taylor Free Solo on Instagram. And that's where you can find me. And yeah, we'll be updating, I think, from the field in Kenya starting at the end of the week. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Taylor. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'll just give some quick shout outs to people. We had Carol from New Jersey. We have Susan in Quebec, Eflam in California, Phoenix, Arizona. We have Argentina. We have the Bahamas and Cleveland and Belgium and more coming in, saying thank you so much. So, once again, thank you for the important work that you do too, just as a fellow human living on this beautiful earth, and with the work that you're doing towards improving what we have here, and protecting, saving, and transforming. So thank you again, and to everyone, we will see you next time here on Creative Live. You can check out all the upcoming episodes of Creative Live TV right down on the screen below you if you're on creativelive.com/TV. And you can listen to all the previous episodes of We Are Photographers on creativelive.com/podcast, or you can subscribe wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. So signing off for now, we will see you all next time, and thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you again to Taylor Rees.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of Creative Live. You all know that we have more than 2,000 classes and more than 10,000 hours of learning, inspirational, and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on Creative Live. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top Creative Live classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened, fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on Creative Live? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours. If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into Creative Live TV today.